Speaking of the internet and Twitter, our next guest, I was so thrilled we were able to put this together because I don't know if you'd agree with me, Gros. We had a lot of guys we liked when we did the show every day, but there might not have been one that we liked more and that we thought of as unpredictable. And sometimes that's a tricky box because sometimes he'd come on and it would just be a great visit and all that. But other times he'd come on and he'd be in a bar with Dennis Rodman or resigning from Sports Illustrated or doing a million other things. And Mike Silver was absolutely one of my favorites.
Absolutely, the America's preeminent rock and roll football writer, as you used to call him, and it was all of that was I couldn't agree more. It was a segment that we look forward to every week because you can absolutely count on the guy bringing it, and he still does. He still does on Twitter. He's still fighting a good fight out there for NFL Network now.
Yeah, wait till he finds out we're not having him on today. We're just going to let him sit in the backstage area and watch us. Let's bring him in. There he is.
Happy Blocktober, everybody.
Hey, Michael.
Blocktober is just my favorite holiday of the year.
It's the most wonderful time of the year, and I just want you guys to know that I'm repping today.
Oh, nice.
So it is a great cause. I hope everybody gets behind it, and I've had the opportunity to visit the beautiful nation of Jamaica and great people, and fired up for the hoops team.
It's going to be something if they can pull this off, Mike. We were talking earlier about I said to Coach Rick Turner, the head coach of the team, there's no more viral video, maybe in history, than the Dreams video on TikTok right now. It's everywhere. Everybody's into it. And it kind of dovetails into what Jamaica's talking about. What a great – and it's not an unrealistic dream, a dream to make the Olympics with their basketball team. How cool that would be for a nation that, has had some sports success, don't get me wrong, but this would be a big step for them to take to add to what they've done.
I mean, if they want to let Usain Bolt, just get out on the break, I feel like he's not getting caught, baseline to baseline. Just a thought. In fact, if they just want to let the sprinters, run people down, that might be something to explore.
I mean, like we talked about with the bobsled team, I mean, it's just a matter of kind of making the effort and following through on it. And this is a nation that has done it. That has done it in ways you wouldn't expect.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. And I do remember, before I went to Sports Illustrated, I worked for the Santa Rosa Press Democrat and covered the Warriors and got to know Don Nelson pretty well, not always in friendly, interactions, but mostly. And I remember how cool it was when the Lithuanian team and the Grateful Dead got together. And that was Šarūnas Marčiulionis, the great sixth man for the Warriors. Very dogged performer. He would get from point A to point B being the basket, and did not care who was in his way ever. And they, the Dead had some ties, obviously, with the Bay Area, and they had gotten introduced to Nelly, and one thing led to another, and the Lithuanian basketball team was wearing the tie-dye sweats and repping the Dead and the uniforms, and it was really cool.
Mike, I'm not sure if you know the answer to this, but how did that connection happen? I mean, was it just as simple as Marčiulionis being there? How did they connect with the Dead?
I'm trying to remember. The Dead, they were tight with Walton, obviously, and he was on the Celtics, during that great run in the 80s. So they knew Bird, and Nelly had Celtics ties, but I'm trying to remember exactly how the Dead and Lithuania got together, because I do think there were some Bay Area specific parts of that too, and obviously Šarūnas Marčiulionis was the glue there, and I think it was a Rooney Nelly some sort of collaboration. But I think the Dead had also heard that they were, Lithuania was really good. They were a legit, I think they won a medal and maybe the silver, and I think they were a new nation, or a renewed nation, after the fall of the Soviet Union, back when it was cool for Americans and Republicans to be anti-Russia, but I digress. But Lithuania didn't have a lot of money, and the Dead, I think, wanted to help out, and it was cool branding, but it was also like in the spirit of the Dead, the counterculture kind of, peace and love mid-'60s origins of the Dead, it kind of went hand in hand.
It sort of speaks to what the Olympics can be. I mean, you can have that situation. We of course remember, those of us who are old enough, back in '68, the political protests that happened. There's something unique about the Olympics that kind of lends itself to kind of what we're doing today, to creating a Cinderella story kind of out of the ether and having it become an international sort of sensation.
Yeah, and honestly, the Cinderella story in 2021 will be if the games take place. I mean,
True.
We've seen some encouraging things with the NBA getting done and baseball now closing in, and the NFL's kind of, been smoother than I thought. We're going to see how college football goes, but the thought of an Olympic Village and just the way the Olympics have, proceeded during my lifetime, and I got to go to the one in Athens. I mean, it's an incredible scene, but it's we got a long way to go, and that's my first Cinderella hope that we actually can have a games.
Well, and the good thing is with Jamaica trying to qualify for 2024, boy, if we're still sitting here in 2024 hoping for Olympics, I bet the three of us won't be on here talking together and laughing it up.
I love my house, but I don't love it that much. I mean,
right.
Hear you.
Hey, your basketball bona fides. You talk about the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. I didn't know you. I don't think Grosby either. But you told a great story about being at the old Coliseum for the Warriors Sonic series in, I think it would be '92, and the Lister Blister. And you said you lost your decorum for a few minutes as a member of the media, right?
Well, okay. So this was an incredible thing. So you remember the Warriors were favored, and I was part of the media crew. I was with the Press Democrat, traveling to Seattle for games 3 and 4 of that series. And it was during the Rodney King riots. It was when the verdict went down. We were in Seattle. And I remember thinking, I think I said out loud to some other writers, like, well, it's a good thing we're in Seattle because nothing's going to go. Again, this is before Seattle was stigmatized with its rioting reputation. Long before. And I remember saying, well, we're in Seattle. It's like the whitest place ever. Like nothing's going to go down here. And then turned out there were actually, events going on in Seattle. But I'll never forget. So Greg Papa, the great announcer, was the Warriors play-by-play guy then. I remember sitting in 13 Coins with him. It's 13 Coins, right?
Yep, 13 Coins.
Late night. George Karl was in there. It was this great scene. One of the nights. And the night of the riots, though, and a few writers and I were with Greg Papa, and I was saying, man, of course we all believe strongly in the cause, and this verdict is terrible, but you can't be like, they pulled a guy out of a truck and hit him in the head with a brick. I mean, some innocent guy. And Greg Papa was like, no, people have to die. It's the only way. And he was obviously speaking for effect, but it was one of the vivid scenes. I believe I got kicked out of Rock Candy that same trip for pouring my own beer because the bartender was super lazy and left, and I poured my own pint of beer and got kicked out. And Greg Papa, with his incredible voice, spent 20 minutes talking me back in, I was later told, went back in, and then instead of kissing butt, I made one more comment about, hey, you should keep an eye on the bar, and they got kicked out again. And so that was fun. But yeah, we obviously, media people, we're trained to be objective, and and my whole shtick with Cal, and I obviously am not objective when it comes to Cal, but if I covered Cal, I would put that aside. Thankfully, I don't. But certainly any now I just cover the NFL, so I have the luxury of actually rooting for the Warriors, my childhood team. But at the time, you're not thinking of it that way as a journalist. You're just like, cool. If the Warriors win, cool. If the Sonics win, cool. I'm just going to do my job. And, you have friends that you like or stories that you like, but it's not the same as being a fan. And we're certainly not allowed to cheer ever. That is just highly, highly frowned upon. And back in those days, we always had good seats. So we were, instead of courtside where we would have been in the regular season, we were behind the basket on the baseline, front row. And that was the basket where Sean Kemp went up, twice, but really the one that everyone remembers where he knocked Lister down. And it just came right to me. I was on the baseline, and it hasn't really happened in my career like this. I just lost my mind. It was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. He went up and tomahawk dunked on Alton Lister, who's like 7'3", knocked him down. It was the moment that Sean Kemp kind of told the rest of the country, like, I am a massive force. And I just started jumping up and down and high-fiving fans behind me. And my mouth was just wide open. It was the coolest thing I'd ever seen in my life. And it wasn't like Go Sonics. It was just like, I can't believe that I just saw that like 3 feet away. It was so cool.
I was in the last row of the Coliseum and nearly went all the way down, did the same thing, leapt up and down and went absolutely nuts.
Sure. Yeah. And I remember at the time the slam dunk contest had kind of grown a little stale. And my suggestion after that was put Alton Lister under the basket during the slam dunk contest and then let people just throw down jams. That might save it.
You mentioned, of course, and we talked about it, you're exclusively with the NFL now. And what do you think? I mean, you talked about so far so good, but I noticed there was another positive test that resulted in the Seahawks game being flexed to the nighttime slot just to make sure they had it. What do you think? Is the NFL going to be able to pull this off?
Well, a lot of coaches and GMs and players I know are pleasantly surprised so far. They thought we're not going to play at all, or if we try to play, it's going to be really, really, really hard. So we've gotten the games in so far. Now they've had to do some juggling. They are holding kind of that 18th week, and it's going to happen soon. For example, if this Raiders-Bucks game gets delayed past Tuesday with the Raiders having all these tests, the Raiders have already had their bye. So once you have any team that's already had its bye impacted beyond the next Tuesday, you're now into that 18th week. So there's probably going to end up being an 18th week. And then there may even end up being a 19th week, depending on how things go. Now, if the only games remaining in those weeks are, I don't know, who can I crap on? Jags.
Anyone in the NFC East.
Yeah, anyone in the NFC East, although they might have to decide the division title. But if that's all that's left, or even if it's for seeding, you don't have to play them. But if it's a real game, then probably that's where you are. And this is best case because we could have to reduce the size of the season. They would get rid of the 1 week break or the 2 week break between the conference title games and the Super Bowl, which has happened, used to go down sometimes in the past. They would postpone the Super Bowl and push it back if need be. So all that's on the table, but they just have contingency plans every time something goes down, and they're trying to save and keep it in 17 weeks, but we're right on the precipice of losing that. So, listen, I mean, just watching the science, I mean, cold weather, flu season, not being able to be outside as much, teams that are out of contention maybe getting a little loose. I'm a little, I'm a little skeptical that we're just going to roll through this. I talked to one owner yesterday who said, I think we should play if we can. And I know the Raiders might have 5 linemen out. You know what? Our rosters are essentially 70 big with the practice squads. Just play 5 other linemen. His attitude was try to play through, obviously, while not jeopardizing the health and safety of players by exposing them to potential positives. But, it's just the way football is, and the fact that, everyone's going home to their family every day, it just makes me feel like we're going to have some sort of outbreak at some point.
Yeah. You think back to May. I mean, I think there's a lot of people maybe that feel this way, which is I'm really excited that there are games. I'm scared. I'm nervous for everybody, but I'm excited that there's games just from a selfish standpoint, something for me to watch. I think back to May when there was nothing going on and The Last Dance ran on ESPN. I just thought that was it almost felt like this was a present from whoever, wherever COVID has come from. Here's a present. Everybody can enjoy this and we can all relate to it. And I'm interested in your thought on it, Mike, because one of the things I thought above everything was that documentary captured the vibe of the 90s NBA, the superstar, all the rock stars, politicians, TV stars that were always. I remember walking through Key Arena one night. I walked around a corner and bumped into Leonardo DiCaprio and like 7 of his handlers. I mean, you never knew who you were going to see again.
Yeah, was MJ in town? Then yes, of course. Yeah,
right.
I mean, and I have a lot of notes on The Last Dance. First of all, I wish it had been the Rodman 30 for 30, which came out about a year ago, because I was all over that one, but
I bet.
not over The Last Dance. But okay, so here are my notes. First of all, as far as Dennis, I got a text during the Rodman episode where they talked about him taking off and going to Vegas and disappearing during the season. And I got a bunch of texts like, hey, were you on that trip? And I was like, I don't think I was on that one, but I'm actually not sure. Like, I literally, there were so many Rodman Vegas trips. It was during the NFL season, so it seems like I wouldn't have been, but I don't know. California's pretty close to Vegas. There were a few times where I just ended up. So my first note is, it is unbelievable to me that in the mid-90s, there is seemingly no footage of us going out. And by us, I mean me, Rodman, that whole scene, because we did not hide. We were always wide out in the open of populated places, making no VIP areas, no ropes. When he gambled at the Mirage, he was right there out on the floor on the craps tables. When we went to Crowbar in Chicago, we were not in the VIP area. We were in the middle of it could not have been, more conspicuous. And yet, think about how much stuff has changed. Cell phone cameras, right? There's no footage of us anywhere. Now, that's probably a good thing. Except
it is a good thing.
It is, but like, I'm watching with my kids and stuff, and I'm like, can I just see 8 seconds of us snaking through, manhole, gay bar in Chicago or something? Just like, can we just, like, the outfits? Like, it would be cool. So it shocks me how much the world has changed. The second note is, I grew up with Steve Kerr, and, he's a dear friend of mine. And, I was not emotionally prepared for the episode where we got to see his mom, and we saw the footage of his father's funeral, in '84, our freshman year of college, and the hoop that we used to shoot at outside Steve's house, where in high school and junior high, where Steve and I would be announcing mock games, and I always felt bad because we were so loud. I mean, think about me, how loud I am, especially loud as a kid. And, Dr. Kerr would be in there, one of the great thinkers of our time, one of the great experts on Arab affairs ever, and just an esteemed professor and educator. And he's probably in there, like, trying to solve peace in the Middle East, conceptually. And, this jerk is out there, yelling. And Steve and I used to laugh so much because the radical pro-Israel movement they were not real fans of Dr. Kerr, and he was not anti-Israel, and he was a very progressive guy, but he was known to enunciate the perspective of other nations sometimes, and I believe one of the organizations at one point tried to blow up the Kerr family car, unsuccessfully, thank God. But Steve and I always had a running joke about how they probably wouldn't be too pleased if they saw me hanging out shooting hoops outside the house, the JDL or whoever it was. Like, first the bomb doesn't go off, and now this kid's out here. So seeing Steve's mom, Ann, interviewed, and just a remarkable lady who, like, looks incredible. And, I got kind of choked up about that and seeing Steve. So it was cool. It was cool to watch. That was back in the Tiger King stage of the quarantine and the pandemic. And, it certainly worked out timing wise. I feel like, in terms of Dennis, I hope people get a chance to watch the 30 for 30 that aired on ESPN. It's pretty comprehensive, but I really tried hard to get into some of the themes there about just how ahead of his time he was in terms of speaking up for the rights and perspectives of marginalized people, and how that really resonated with a lot of people, and just how unorthodox that was in the 90s. And he really connected, because we had conversations about it. He really connected with the counterculture, late 60s, 70s people who were, that's what a lot of the public theater was about. But I just saw so many people gay people, transgender people, people who had felt their whole lives like they were treated like, marginalized people, and they were scared to be themselves, go up to him and just be really emotional about how much it had meant to them that he was, letting those things be public, and the way he approached that. And it was just a super cool, emotional thing. Now, I also saw some of the craziest freaks ever, bombard him with attention intermittently too. So it was, the wildness was not overstated, but there was also a soul to that I hope isn't getting lost in history.
Well, considering where he came from, it's just an absolutely unbelievable story, because he could have been anything, and could have backed off and decided to be a man in full. I mean, decided to live life, to take advantage of the opportunity that he got to the absolute maximum degree, it seemed to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's a crazy story, and part of it had to do with growing 6 inches after high school, and part of it had to do with being taken in by a family in Oklahoma where their young son had just accidentally shot his brother in a hunting accident. Super tragic, horrible thing. And had befriended Dennis, was far younger than Dennis, and brought him home. And he ended up being there playing for a small college, an NAIA school. And, it's an amazing story. I turned down the first Rodman book, which is a long story and awesome, but Tim Kuhn did an incredible job with that. But then he decided they got a big deal to do a second book, and I was incredibly touched because Dennis came to me and said, "I want you to do this one." And he didn't have to do that because I had helped him find Tim, who I knew would do an incredible job on Bad as I Want to Be, and it was I think it was the biggest selling sports book in history, and at the time. So it was an incredible book. They had no reason not to keep that formula going. But Dennis, felt close to me and felt like we had missed that opportunity. So I was like, yeah, sure. Let's talk about it. So this is now he's on the Bulls, because I met him when he was on the Spurs. And it's right before the '96 finals. And Dwight Manley, then his agent, then followed up and called me and said, "Listen, you know how it is with Dennis. We got to go out and party, and then we'll talk about it the next day, but we'll have a real conversation about the book." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "Listen, just fly out, come to game one. I'll have a ticket for you at Will Call, and we'll go out after the game. We'll do our thing, and we'll discuss." And I was like, "Oh, cool." So I fly to Chicago. I go to Will Call. There's one ticket, and it's courtside. And I'm like, okay, Sonics, Bulls, game one, 1996 NBA Finals, courtside. And I sit down in my seat a little bit before the game, and there's this nice guy sitting next to me, and we start talking. And, "Oh, yeah, Dwight Manley left me this ticket too." "Yeah, I think he put us together on purpose." "Cool. What's your name?" "Oh, I'm a big Sonics fan. I'm Jeff." And I'm like, eventually I'm like, "It's Jeff Ament." It's 1996. And you guys know Jeff. He is the most chill, down to earth dude, probably in the history of, music stardom. And he's a total hoops fan. So we had a lot to talk about. We had a blast. Great game. I think the Bulls won game one. Yeah, they did. The Bulls won game one, so Jeff was a little bummed, but incredible. So then we go out, and a big crew, and Eddie's there. I'm like, "Oh, Eddie Vedder, 1996. This is all right." So that was my '96 final story. Either '97 or '98, one of the finals games in Utah when I was out there. I ended up hanging out with Billy Corgan after the game, who was a big Bulls fan and had Chicago ties. And that was the cool thing in the early days with Dennis, before the hanger-on factor intensified. There were a lot of people that would be in the orbit that were just kind of into meeting Dennis or knew him a little, and there were music people in the world peripherally that would bring him in. So we had dinner one night in Chicago, just randomly. This guy Tommy, who was a music guy, said, "Hey, some friends of mine are going to come meet us at dinner. but first we're going to go to their show. Well, it was Talking Heads without David Byrne. They were touring as No Talking, Just Head. And with Jeanette Napolitano was filling in for Byrne as the singer. And they, incredible, rocked it, pretty small place. And then afterwards, we all went to a late dinner. And Tina Weymouth, one of my idols, is the bassist of Talking Heads, is sitting next to me. There's about, 8 of us at the table, 9 of us. The 3 Talking Heads members and me and Dennis and maybe 3 other people. And I'm sitting next to Tina, and I'm in full-on flirt mode because she's a rock star. She's one of my idols, and she's super cool and cute. And I'm like totally turning on the charm. I didn't realize until like about an hour into the dinner that Chris Franz, the drummer, was her husband, and he was kind of bemusedly looking on from the other side of the table, just like rolling his eyes, knowing, like, not threatened, just knowing that I was shooting my shot for no reason. And of course, I'm married too. I wasn't really doing anything, but it took me about a full hour of flirting to realize that it was a little awkward.
And then, of course, she went home with Rodman anyway, and everybody
they seem pretty solid. There's a few weird music marriages like Pat Benatar and Spider, and like there's a few that like they just stay together amid all the crazy.
Do you and Rodman stay in touch at all? I mean, not all the time, obviously, but do you occasionally talk with him?
Yeah, there's it's sporadic, but I always forget every time I talk to him. I always forget until it's too late that he doesn't say goodbye on the phone. He just hangs up without warning.
Okay,
And
wait a minute. The guy in the middle does the exact same thing. Gros, for years, he ghosts you at bars, and then he just, when the conversation's over, bang, there's no goodbye. So
I don't like saying goodbye.
So Rodman and Gros should get on the phone because who knows, how. So, there have been some interesting calls. There was the time he called me the day before the Seahawks Broncos Super Bowl. I was walking around in Soho, and I had to step out of a rag and bone or something to take the call, and he wanted me to come to North Korea with him. And I said, hey, dude, that's a great idea. What could be better than like a loud, drunken, opinionated Jew, hanging out with your boy? But he had been in some rehab situation and was super lucid and cool. It was amazing because an off his meds, Richie Incognito, and that was the year of the big scandal in Miami, called me that night. And I had to talk to him for about an hour plus. Rodman I talked to for about 45 minutes. And I'm like, what's with the crazies calling me, the day before my biggest work day of the year? But, so Dennis and I, when, first of all, when Dennis went in the Hall of Fame, I was there. I was invited by Dennis, so of course I was there. His only former teammates there were Steve Kerr and Jed Bushler. So, and Dennis and Steve and I, Dennis knows that Steve and I are close. So when the Warriors got rolling under Steve, Dennis and I started talking, hey, do you want to go to a game? Should we do this? Should we do that? Well, one of the cool things that happened was, Dennis is super sensitive and emo, and especially when it comes to daughters. Well, so one of the things that happened was, my daughter Natalie was born after I met Dennis, and he remembers how little she was and what a life-changing event that was for me. My first kid, he had a daughter, Alexis, was his first, and daughter is his favorite Pearl Jam song. Like, he's very, very keyed in. So one time he called when Natalie was with me, and they talked, and there's an incredible photo I have framed of, I went out to do a story on my relationship with Kerr for SI in 97. Natalie was a baby, and there's a picture that an SI photographer took right outside the Bills locker room at the United Center. Rodman's wearing this like gold sequin crazy top, and she's grabbing at the sequins, at 9 months old, 8 months old, because she's so tripped out. And Rodman is handing her a can of beer as though the kid is going to take the beer, and it's captured in photo. So, so Natalie and Rodman talked, and it was all cool. Well, Natalie ended up going to Cal a year after Steve's daughter, Maddie, who is a Cal volleyball player and now is at Berkeley Law, incredible kid. And Natalie and Maddie, Maddie helped kind of recruit her, not recruiter, but recruiter in terms of, hey, you should come here. And they were buddies at Cal. So at one point, I had told Dennis, like, hey, Steve's daughter, Maddie, remember little Maddie, and Natalie are hanging out in Berkeley and they're buddies. Well, during the playoffs or something, in the middle of a Warrior playoff game, Natalie and Maddie, I guess, had been out the night before, and Maddie actually texted me a picture of her and Natalie flipping off the camera, with beers in their hands or something. And it was, they were flipping me off, ha, ha, ha. And I sent it to Dennis, just like, hey, that's Natalie and Maddie. And the phone rang like 2 seconds later, and he was super upset. He was like, why are they mad at me? And I was like, no, dude, they're not flipping you off. Like, it's not always about you, bro. It's not always about you. But when I want to relay to people how sensitive Dennis is, like, yeah, emo Dennis, like, no, they're not mad at you. They love you.
You ever run across anyone like him, or is he a unique character of the ones you run across?
I mean, you know me, I've had all the crazies, right? So I've had crazy. I've had Barry Switzer and Andre Rison, and, I have stories for days about the outliers, but no one like him in terms of the willingness to live out loud and have adventure be kind of paramount in that equation. There are people who live out loud, but it feels more contrived. And people always thought Dennis was more contrived than it actually was. And I was there. Yes, he did date Madonna, and she certainly is a marketing genius and probably imparted some lessons. And yes, he, enjoyed the spoils of it. But it was never like, hey, man, we should do this because that'll get attention. It was always like some punch-drunk breakfast, and like, oh, what if I put on a wedding dress, bro, and walk through New York City, and it was more like a goof and a dare, and again, the public theater. Like, I mean, I educated him some. I taught him. I sent him a Hendrix doc that had a scene where Hendrix goes on the Dick Cavett show in the heydays, wearing like a purple satin robe and nothing else, no shoes, and and so. We talked about the Merry Pranksters and Kesey and all that stuff. So I think that was his way of poking fun at the conventions of society. And as I said, he did have some very strong feelings. Dennis had felt like he was a freak inside and he was a weirdo inside, and that if he ever let that out, it would be a dire, horrible situation for him because so many people would revile him. And he was stunned that when he did that, there was an outpouring also of people who just, loved him and felt like he was a hero for doing it. And so that really, fueled him. And that first Crazy Rodman SI story, after, I met him and we went on a 4-day, 3-state bender. And, on the Saturday, I guess I'm 3 days in, we're flying from Vegas to Houston to San Antonio. And he looks at me and he goes, man, he goes, what's your next story? And I go, actually, I'm doing this weird NASCAR story for SI. It turned out to be that black and white weird NASCAR cover we did in 1995. And he's on the Spurs. It's the middle of the Western Conference Finals. And he kind of looks at me and he goes, man, you are so bleeped. And I go, what do you mean? He goes, it's never going to be this good. He goes, you're going to go on these stories and these guys aren't going to open up to you, and they're not going to be as fun as me, and they're not going to be as weird, and they're not going to be as interesting, and they're not going to be as open, and it's never going to be like this. And I was kind of like, shut up. But deep inside, I kind of suspected that was true. And yeah, so no, I haven't had that combination yet. I've had a lot of crazies, both conspicuous and inconspicuous. They tend to flock to me, but that was a weird slice in time.
Well, Mike, it's great to catch up with you again. I thought the best part of The Last Dance, whether it was true or not, is when Jordan is relaying the conversation he had with Phil Jackson, where he says, He's not going to Vegas for 2 days. He's not coming back. That was just brilliant. I had no trouble believing it. It's great to see you, my friend. And I know Gross feels the same way. We couldn't have done this and had as much fun without you.
I'm so glad to be back together with the band, and I hope the three of us can be hoisting a Manny's Pale Ale in person as soon as we can in your amazing city.
Stay safe, buddy.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Mike.